So I think it's 3:15. We can already start our session. So my name is Daniel Herrera. I work for Polis Network. And today I will be sharing this session called Global News in Shared Transport. Today I'm joined by three cities which are working in building their cities around shared mobility solutions and strategies. I'm joined by, if we can have the next slide, you can introduce. I'm joined by Sara, Kalsås, mobility advisor for the city of Oslo, Rodger, Lentz, assistant city manager for the city of Wilson in North Carolina, United States. Ramu Nair, who is a representative from the industry from Invers, and Sean Wiedel, Deputy Commissioner of the Chicago Department of Transportation. So a couple of housekeeping rules. Each presenter will have 5 minutes to present their case study around shared mobility. Then we will have questions from the audience, which you can post here in the chat, and we'll pick them up. So after the rounds of presentations, we will have a panel discussion where you can also post your questions to the presenters in the chat box. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my colleague Sara Kalsås, who will talk about the zero emission mobility and the electrification strategy of the city of Oslo in Norway.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Can you see my screen? All right, thank you. So I will be talking about zero emission mobility in Oslo. My name is Sara Kalsås. I work as a mobility advisor in electric mobility. And first of all, just very shortly, what we are trying to achieve with zero emission transport and with shared mobility. First of all, we want walking, cycling, and public transport to be the preferred modes of travel in Oslo. And we also want to reduce vehicle traffic by 20% by the end of this year, and by 1/3 compared to 2015. And shared mobility is a really important part in this traffic reduction goal. In addition to this, we want basically all other vehicles to be emission-free by 2030. And to do this, we are building charging points for electric cars. We have around 2,300 normal chargers now and around 350 fast chargers. And most of these are on public grounds in streets. And most of these are built on streets, as you can see to the left. These are for people who don't have parking spots next to their house or in the parking garage. So that's really our target group for these types of investments. For people who have a parking garage, we have a grant scheme to make sure that they can get some of the investment cost in upgrading the grid covered, so that they can have a charging box and by that be able to use zero emission mobility. And this has facilitated around 60,000 charging points, and it's quite cost efficient for the city, and it's very convenient for the user. Furthermore, we are working now on electric freight. When we started, we have a really strong focus on the private cars, but now we are trying to more reduce the use of private cars and are focusing more and more on freight vehicles. And we are creating consolidation hubs. That's the pictures to the left, where we have a project together with the Norwegian Mail and DHL and a few other carriers. to make sure that the city logistics can be done more efficiently and with smaller zero-emission vehicles. In addition to that, we are also building charging stations for electric heavy-duty vehicles, and this together with the Port Authority. And we opened the charging station this June with 6 charging points of 300 kilowatts each. And the day we opened, an electric cement truck actually came in to charge. And that was the first day I realized that electric cement trucks actually existed, because that was news to me even. Furthermore, we are working on electrifying the taxi fleet, and all taxis will have to be electric by 1st of November 2024 to get a taxi permit in Oslo. This was maybe not the most popular thing we have done, but it is a very efficient measure to electrify the taxi fleet. We also had a pilot project with wireless fast charging for taxis. You can see the charger on the picture to the right. The blue square on the ground is basically the whole charger. The electric taxis that are adapted for this can charge on 75 kilowatts in the taxi queue. We are also doing different measures on shared mobility. We have a car sharing scheme that we in the city of Oslo has organized, and it's about 1,000 parking spots mostly in the central areas of the city that are now dedicated for car sharing. So we're really trying to put this into areas where people quite often normally own a car, to show that they don't necessarily have to own a car to use it sometimes. We also have a bike sharing scheme called Oslo City Bike. They have around 3,000 bikes, and I think it's around 1,000 of those are available in the winter. They recently got winter tires, so if you are ever in Oslo in the winter and feel like biking in minus 12 degrees, that's absolutely a possibility. It's not for the faint though. We also have a micromobility scheme that it's about 8,000 small electric scooters and some electric bikes that are being put out in the city. And we're really seeing that people really like this mode of transport and the flexibility that it has. In addition to this, we have put up a mobility hub. This is in an EU project called Move 21, which is a sort of a living lab project, and where we have put up a mobility hub where we have car sharing, bike sharing, electric scooters, and parcel lockers. So this is so that people can choose for themselves what kind of mode of transport they need. So to conclude, we are doing a lot to try to dedicate space to zero-emission mobility, both with car sharing and increased focus on pedestrians and cyclists. And if you need a car, we want it to be zero-emission. We are also working on the freight and the city logistics to make it more efficient, to cause less traffic, but also that this will be zero emission as soon as possible. We are working on establishing a zero emission zone, which is dependent on the national government to change some laws, which is not moving as fast as we would like. And we are also removing a lot of parking spots. So in the last 8 years, around 6,000 parking spots has been removed from the city, and the space has been used for other modes of transport, or it's been used to widen sidewalks and things like that. We also have a car-free city project, which is where we removed basically every parking spot in the central city area to make it more difficult to drive into the area, so that people will more use public transport and other sustainable modes of transport. So that's what
Thank you. Thank you, Sara. That was very interesting. So if anyone from the audience have a question, please post it in the chat. Otherwise, because I see no questions in the chat, I do have one question, Sara, perhaps. So it was very interesting to see how how it's shaping the charging infrastructure, all these type of charging infrastructures that you have in Oslo, how it's shaping the redesign of the public space. With regards to the mobility hubs concept, I see you have this Move 21 project. How has this been, this process of actually combining share mobility with charging infrastructure and also redesigning the public space? Have you been able to, let's say, actually allocate more space, not for cars, but for accommodate all these different modes of transport that you have now in your city?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a difficult priority to allocate the space to different modes of mobility. I think in the with the Move 21 and the mobility hub we have established has been cooperation between a lot of actors, and the project has also been in the neighborhood and asking people what kind of transport or what kind of mode of transport they are missing, and sort of to place the mobility hub in such a way that people can really use them in their daily lives. So it's located a bit outside the city, so it's typically in an area where people have to either walk quite a bit to get to a bus or to the metro. So it's sort of meant to fill the gaps in a way. It's quite new. It opened in August, so we are really still trying to see if we achieved what we hoped for. But so far, it seems like people at least really appreciate that it's more choices between which transport modes they can use.
Thank you, Sara. We do have, in the meantime, some questions. Actually, 3 questions. But let's start for the first one. So. Robin Tang asks, how has Oslo gained support for these initiatives from key stakeholders, for instance, elected representatives from the public and the business world?
Yes, so we have had a very, what can I say, a city council who hasn't been afraid to create some conflict, which has been quite helpful. For example, they've been very vocal about that they want to remove parking spots and to really present why it's good for the public. It's like what is it to gain on this. And I think that's one lesson is, for example, with the car-free city project, that we realized really fast that we should have called it something other than car-free, because it sounds very negative to a lot of people. And instead, we should have focused on all the other things you can do with that space, which is generally good for most people. So it has been quite a lot of conflicts, but I think it's important to focus on the gains, and there's usually always some gains for all actors involved.
Another question, so for the digital part, basically, do you have a full math app integrating all these different modes of transport in Oslo?
Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yeah. So the question is, do you have a full math app that integrates the different transport modes plus the mobility hubs in Oslo. Yeah.
Yes, so the public transport company is involved in that project. So they have been working. They have the app that is for the metro and the bus and the tram. So they have integrated to the bike sharing at least, and I think the micro mobility is connected to that app as well. I'm not sure how connected it is, but I think at least you can sort of get transferred to the e-scooter app, or you can see if there's an e-scooter close by to your bus stop, for example.
Let's have one more question. So there is a question about parking spots. So where you have been removing parking, is that mainly in commercial areas or in residential ones, or a mixture? Yeah.
It's both, really. It's mainly in the inner city. So the car-free city project is in really the city center. So there it's mostly commercial areas, and a bit further out it's quite often in residential areas, because a lot of these parking spots have, for example, been removed to build a cycling lane, and they are located all over the city, both centrally and in the residential areas. So it's absolutely a mix of both.
Thank you very much, Sara. So let's move to our next speaker. From the city of Wilson, Rodger Lentz, he will talk about on-demand microtransit in the city of Wilson, North Carolina, US. Rodger, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. Very impressive what Oslo is accomplishing there. It shows how far behind we are here in North Carolina and across the United States. So thank you for very informative. So I wanted to talk about microtransit. I assume that most on here know what microtransit is, but it's an app-based on-demand transit system that we are running with minivans. So I'll talk about that and the success we've had. Wilson, just to give people, because I imagine most people don't know where Wilson is. It's about a little over 40 miles from our capital city of Raleigh. It's a standalone city of about 50,000 people with many industrial employment centers and a historic downtown. And if you're wondering what that thing is behind me, you can Google whirligigs, and you can learn all about the art that is behind me. Okay. Oop, let's go to the, there we go. Sorry, so there's a little delay there. Okay, so Wilson had a fixed route system. And the way funding works in the United States and in North Carolina, as a small city, I get my transit funding directly from the State Department of Transportation. And honestly, it's inadequate. And so our bus system was running, covering only about less than half of the city. And the buses only ran, once an hour, which is not a very good way to, get to work or to, get your daily errands. If you think about, trying to get a gallon of milk with a bus that runs just an hour, taking that to the grocery store, it's over a 2-hour journey just to go there and back. So it's not very efficient and not enough funding to increase that frequency. And Wilson does have a high poverty rate. So we have a lot of people that don't have access to their own cars. We have senior citizens. We have people that would be unbanked. They don't have a debit or credit card. So things like Uber or fully app-based are not accessible to those folks. So those were some of the things that went into play. Even not having access to a smartphone was, a percentage of the population that we needed to be concerned with as we looked at different alternatives. So you would think that's kind of odd for, we would go to an app-based transit, but we've had some workarounds that I think have worked quite well. So first of all, we wanted to make sure our vehicles were accessible to all. So we have, we have a percentage of the vehicles in our fleet that are accessible. For those that had mobility limitations, we also could go curb to curb, which is unlike our bus system, where you might have to go several blocks to get to the bus stop, sometimes on streets that didn't have a sidewalk. So not the safest journey. So we were able to solve for that. We were able to offer where people could use a traditional phone, not a smartphone, to call into a call center. So if they needed that, they could call in. And then also for the unbanked, the ability to buy vouchers with cash at different outlets so that they would not be left behind if they did not have a debit or credit card to pay for the trip. So those are just some of the things we did to make sure that this system was accessible to all. The biggest, we had a high unemployment rate, especially before COVID, and COVID certainly helped with that. Our unemployment rate's now very low compared to its historic averages. But what we found when surveying our riders is that 52% of users are using it to commute to work. And when we've asked people about economic mobility, have they done better for themselves as a result, the answer is an overwhelming positive response to that I've been able to increase my standard of living because of improved access to transportation. Also for others, getting to grocery store, for seniors getting to healthcare appointments like the doctor's appointment and whatnot, this system has proven to be much more efficient. And you can just see the map on the left. That's the city limits there, and you can see the the course of the trips there and the distribution of those across the city. So that really proved to be very important for us in accessing all the different corners and especially employment opportunities available within the city. The growth has been tremendous. So on an annual basis, our fixed route system was averaging between 70 and 75,000 trips a year. In our first year with microtransit, well, you can see the course here of the increase in ridership and the increase in average riders, the unique riders each month. So over 1,000 unique riders every month. And in our wrong way. There we go. In our first year, and this was launched during COVID, so September 2020 is when we launched. So difficult time. A lot of cities had shut down their transit systems or reduced services. So in our first year, we did 96,000 trips, so a pretty big increase over the fixed route. And we had almost 2,400 active riders during that first year. Just to compare that, so that's a peak. Our peak week was 2,577 trips versus our fixed route, which averaging about 1,450 trips in a week. Compare that now to the third year. We did almost 220,000 transit trips with 8,540 unique riders. So tremendous growth in transit over the last 3 years as a result of having microtransit in our city. And I'm giving the numbers I'm giving you on the fixed route was pre-COVID, right? So that wasn't 70,000 trips during COVID. That was 70 to 75,000 trips pre-COVID. So this has really expanded transit access across our city. And what it's done is it's unlocked, what was unmet demand for transit usage. So I'll show you some survey responses of who our riders are. But here, our peak in the third year was 4,730 trips in a week. And that's compared to the 1,450 trips on average our fixed route was doing. So again, tremendous growth in transit. Some statistics on our average riders. So 57% report incomes below 25,000. So, a lot of people that would be considered in poverty in our community using the service. 73% reporting as being female, 80% being a minority. This community it's about almost half the population is African American. So high population of minorities using the service, and 86% of our users responded not having access to their own car. So this is essential transportation, and you can see some of the quotes there that people have given us in focus groups. Very important to connect people to work, and then those essential services of healthcare and groceries. Oops. Sorry for the sensitive mouse. Okay, and so we were the first community in the state to deploy microtransit, and in fact, the first rural community. We're considered, even at 50,000, we're considered rural by our federal government for transit funding purposes. So we were one of the first communities to take down their entire fixed route transit to replace with microtransit, and we were the first to deploy microtransit in our state. And you can see here how rapidly that's increasing across the state. I've spoken to many counties and cities about our project here in Wilson, and that has garnered a lot of interest across the state. So I think this is a rapidly expanding technology that's going to be used more and more moving forward. Especially, I feel like while Charlotte has light rail and a robust bus system, even they are looking at microtransit for connecting people to those services where a fixed route does not make sense. They're deploying as a first mile, last mile solution, and it's being very successful. So, oops, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you
my
very
contact
much.
information. If you don't get your question today, there's my email if you want to send a question that way.
Thank you, Rodger, for such an interesting presentation. We do have one question in the chat for you. So from
Stop
Hannah.
sharing here.
Yeah.
Let me find the stop. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. So how do you promote your service to increase ridership? That's the first question.
A lot of it's been word of mouth. Of course, we've spoken to employers that have shared the information with their employees. Social media campaigns to share that way. But honestly, when we launched, before COVID, we were thinking we would do all these in-person things to tell people about it. Obviously, that was off the table. And that first year, much of the growth was because of word of mouth.
Thank you, Rodger. So there's a very interesting question here. Robin again. So he likes the term. He liked the term unlocked demand. So he's asking, how have you ensured that service provision and availability keeps up with the growth in demand?
Yeah, that's been a bit of a challenge. So when we launched, we had hoped that your average estimated time for pickup would be 15 minutes. And our first year was a little over 18 minutes, and in the third year was 21 minutes. But of course, compared to a bus only running once an hour, we still feel really good about that. But that has been a challenge, and we are lobbying our state elected officials to provide additional funding towards the service. And I think that link between transportation and jobs is really the political answer to getting that support from the state and federal level for more dedicated funding to the service.
Yeah, which leads us to the next question. So how was this funded, the service? You think he missed that part? I think you gave partially the answer.
Yeah, so well, the fixed route service, we were able to shift that funding here. And then we have gotten some additional state and federal assistance, as well as local dollars going into the service. One of the things we think is untapped is to seek sponsorship from industrial employers and major retailers like Walmart. It's a multinational company makes billions of dollars. They have an arm that they provide funding, so we'd like to go after some of those sources.
Thank you, Roger. So maybe one last question. So do you have, sorry, maybe this one, do you find that the nature of the vehicles you use facilitates people moving item loads that wouldn't have been possible by public transport? So something more about the type of vehicle they use for micro.
Yeah, I think the type of vehicle, you know, I mean, first of all, I wish they, you know, my goal is to hopefully electrify the fleet at some point, and I think the minivan, we're getting better and better with the range of those. As you can imagine, these vehicles are doing hundreds of miles each day. So I don't think we're quite there yet on the electric reliability of a minivan, but we hope to get there. But I think what we're finding is when the service first started, those vehicles could do about 3.5 trips an hour. We're now about 4.5 trips an hour, and about over 50% of the time, your trip is going to be shared on average. In the morning peak and the afternoon peak, almost always you will be having shared trips. So that the way that technology works is if I request a trip and then you request a trip and we're going in generally the same direction, it'll pick me up, it might pick you up, you could get dropped off first, then I could get dropped off. So that's what makes it public transportation, is that those vehicles are shared. So I think that that keeps increasing, which is increasing the efficiency. So I think probably what folks would like to learn, on average in North Carolina, if you look at on demand, the average is a little over $20 a trip for typical on demand. Maybe you call in the paratransit or whatever, is a little over $20 a trip. These trips that we've been able to do from an efficiency standpoint are less than $10 a trip, somewhere between $9 and $10 per trip, and our fixed route was about $15 to $16 a trip. So from a cost perspective, this has proven to be far more efficient in a you know, compared to a Chicago. We're a very low density city compared to a city like, you know, Chicago or New York, right? So that type of efficiency, I think, in a low density community is a commendable achievement.
Thank you very much, Roger, for such interesting insight. So I see that the questions keep coming, so just save them there and post them again during the panel discussion, so we will have time for that. Great. I would like to take it back to Roger for the moment, and I would like to introduce Ramu Nair. He's the head of sales of Invers, and he will be talking to us about the evolution of car sharing. The first few years, Ramu.
Hi everyone, I hope you can hear and see me clearly. Can you see my screen? Stop sharing.
Not your PowerPoint, Ramu.
Not my PowerPoint. Yeah. Oh, no moment. How about this?
There you go.
All right. Sorry about that. A little bit of panicky moment of selecting the wrong window. And then it was like scrolling through and you saw all my company's trade secrets, but sorry about that. So hi guys, my name is Ramu. I'm the head of sales at Invers, and I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a snapshot of how car sharing is evolving in Europe. Before we give into what that means, like, I'd like to give a little bit of an idea about who we are. We are a provider of telematics and IoT platform technology used by car sharing providers in a lot of the markets. And we've been there since 1993. And in Europe, we have a 60% market share. What that means is that of all the cars used in any kind of services through an app where you find a car, and get access to the car via an app, and then use the car and end the rental with the app, it's our technology in these cars. Around 60% of these cars have our technology in them. And to give a bit of an idea, we are a German company. So in the German market, we have a 90% share. And we are based out of Cologne, in Germany, and also in Vancouver, Canada. We've been doing this for 30 years, and this 30 years experience allows us to kind of observe a lot of how car sharing has evolved in the market. And also by talking to our clients, we have learned a lot about how they have adopted to the market, what works for them, what kind of collaboration with cities work for them, etc. And as part of, and this penetration to the kind of all the markets of car sharing that we can see in Europe allowed us to also to do better research of how car sharing is evolved in different markets, where is it higher and lower, etc. So I would love to share with you some results from two of the reports we have done in the past. And one particular report, data points we will jump into, and this is just some more numbers, is how big is this market of car sharing. So if you have to look at the topic of the global car sharing report, one of the reports said that is around 500, let's call it, sorry, something is blocking my view. 548,000 cars in car sharing across the world. And when we really looked into the research into our client base, we see that if you look at free floating car share, that is like users where they can pick the car from anywhere in a spot and return it at any other spot in a city, there are around 60,000 cars in the free floating car sharing market. And this is based on the report we released back in Q2 of this year. And of course, this number is always changing and kind of growing all the time. And if you ask us what is the biggest markets in Europe for car sharing, by far, Germany is the biggest market with around 25,000, more than 25,000 vehicles in free floating car sharing. There's a lot of free floating car sharing players in Germany, but followed by Italy, Poland, Spain, and France. And you can see some of the other major markets. And here's a quick snapshot of some of the big free floating car sharing operators in Europe. In UK itself, the Zipcar with its in London with the free floating car sharing service. In Germany, the big ones are Miles, Share Now, Six Share, etc. And free floating car sharing is growing in many markets, but even more interesting is how station-based car sharing is evolving in different markets. What we call station-based is the cars are one particular point and has to be returned to that point. These points can be on the street, can be mobility hubs, etc., or in a parking garage. But the idea is that the cars are picked up from these points and returned to the same points at the end of the rental. And in this volume, based on our report, we see there are 50,000 cars in station-based car sharing. And the biggest market here again is the German market, with the 15,000 cars in kind of various kind of station-based models, followed by France, Netherlands, UK, Switzerland, etc. Here are some of the major station-based car sharing providers out there. And to give you a quick conclusion of how that market combined together looks like, this is how that numbers looks like. About 40,000 cars in free floating and station-based combined, and the market is biggest is Germany, followed by, I think that's the Netherlands flag with 8,300, or that's French, sorry, and all these other markets that's coming below. I'm not going to talk a lot about car sharing or more presentations than that, but I can definitely be open to questions at this point right now. Daniel, I can't hear you.
I was muted. So thank you very much for this presentation. So if you have any questions from the audience, please post it. I don't see any questions so far. In the meantime, I think we have a poll question that we can introduce. So if you go to the poll section, you will find a question about how well do you think the UK learns from best practices in other places. So go to the poll section and answer that question. Yes, we have a question from Ramu. Let me look at why is Germany the lead market in car sharing? Just size? That's the question.
Size and the number of players in general. There are, I think, in the station-based itself, maybe my colleagues correct, I think there are 200 something individual car sharing operators in various markets, in various cities, and even to the tier 2 towns of Germany offering station-based car sharing services. So that's why we say it's the biggest market, not just in purely the number of cars out there, which is a one metric, but it's also the number of individual operators out there. And we can also take into the number of actual users of car sharing, right? It's a very high number. I cannot recollect on top of my mind, but this is something I can share. If anybody in my team is over there, please share that number on the chat about the average users in car sharing in Germany. It's a very high number.
And maybe linked to that question, the success. So why do you think there is Germany enables all these operators, and what are maybe the nudging actions that encourage people to use car sharing?
I think there's a lot of contributing factors over there. I think one of the earliest startings of car sharing across the world, in Germany, some of the earliest services, for example, Deutsche Bahn started very early a car sharing service called the Flingsters network, which is very much like a hub and spoke method of where there were car sharing services they offered from the stations where the German railway stations with different services. So there was always an accessibility ease with car sharing for operators at the very early stage. And I think Germany being definitely a country of car loving, and something in my presentation I definitely covered, is that I think a big factor is that cities help a lot in some of these cities encourage a lot of car sharing by, just like how Sara was talking about Oslo, that was happened at a very early stage in some other cities in Germany too. For example, Bremen is a great city that encouraged car sharing at a very young people really use it more, and people wanted to use it more with dedicated parking space, etc., from a very early stage.
Thank you very much, Ramu. So yeah, I keep receiving questions. Let's keep them for the panel discussion. So I would like to join to the stage Sean White from the Chicago Department of Transportation. He will talk to us about micro mobility and equity in Chicago. So Sean, the floor is yours.
Morning, everyone. Can you, Ramu, I'll ask you, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see
Okay,
them.
perfect. Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sean Wiedel with the Chicago Department of Transportation, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about micromobility and equity and how we've integrated that into our shared system in Chicago. And hold on, my apologies. Of course, my system decided not to work right. So, okay, there we go. Okay. So a couple things that underlie equity in Chicago and the work that we've done is a number of different metrics we look at, but equitable geographic access are really key to our shared micromobility system. And then Rodger talked a little bit about this too, but access to residents who don't have smartphones. There are a bunch of folks in Chicago, I think, 20 to 30%, it varies time to time, who may have a smartphone, but they may not have a data plan to go along with that. So they can't access our services via an app. And so we've from the very beginning, our bike share system has always provided key fobs. And then with our scooter program, we allow folks to find and unlock scooters using voice calls or text messaging to customer service. And then finally, an underlying metric is, there's a fair number of people who are unbanked, which Rodger also talked about, and I think that number is about 20% in Chicago. Don't have a credit card, don't have a debit card, don't have a bank account, and so we've also intentionally built out our system to include cash-based payments, low-cost access, in-person enrollment, and reduced fares for those folks with financial barriers. So just some baseline here: our bike sharing ecosystem in Chicago. We have two different systems. We have a contractual system. Our bike share system is under contract. The city of Chicago actually owns the bikes and scooters, which I'll talk about as well, that are part of the Divvy system. And for our British colleagues, I understand that Divvy is, I have friends at Transport for London, and I understand that Divvy is slang in Great Britain for something that's not so pleasant. But in Chicago and in America, Divvy is the idea behind you divvy it up, you divide and share. It's a shared resource. So it's a very different meaning here in the American slang versus British slang. But our Divvy bike share system has currently two different types of stations. At the top left, you can see that's our heavyweight station, which is our traditional station element, and that allows for the docking of e-bikes. It allows for the docking of scooters. We're one of the first systems in the US to allow scooter docking within a heavyweight traditional bike share station. And then we also can dock our classic bikes, which are just pedal bikes. As you can see, we have two types of bikes. We have a hybrid electric pedal bike that actually will allow you to, you can lock this bike using this cable lock to a bike rack. You can also lock it with this triangle into a divvy station. We also have classic bikes. The classic bikes do not have any IoT on them, and so therefore they can only be locked in these traditional stations. A couple years ago, we embarked upon an expansion of our citywide system, or of our system, and we added what we called these lightweight stations. And with the lightweight stations, you can see they only accommodate e-bikes. They're specially designed for e-bikes, and the cable lock, they also will allow scooters to lock in them. But as I'll talk about on the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about, let's see, of course, it's not going to work now. Okay, there we go. Okay. So as I'm talking about on this slide a little bit, we actually expanded, the city of Chicago expanded our divvy system, our bike share system, to have citywide e-bike service beginning this year. For context, the city of Chicago is 234 square miles, and you can see the colors here that as we've expanded, we started in the blue in 2013, 10 years ago, and we added the yellow areas just this year with e-bike service. The downside and the most important part of this is that e-bike service and e-bikes in generally the model in the US is that e-bikes have per minute usage fees. Our classic pedal bikes do not have any per minute usage fees. They generally have, they're generally in Chicago, they're 45-minute trips with no additional fees as long as you're a member of our system. With the e-bikes, they're usually a permanent fee, and it varies based on the type of membership that you have. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But the key is we realized that was an inequitable system and that we needed to really double down and add to our system. So you can see this table on the slide. We have over 650 stations on the ground now. We have 173 lightweight stations, which again, don't accommodate anything but e-bikes and scooters. So our goal over the next couple of years is actually to expand and add another 450 heavyweight stations to our bike share system so that people, especially those who are lower income, who maybe can't afford the per minute e-bike fees, will be able to take a bike anywhere in the city, dock it anywhere in the city in one of our traditional stations. But one of the challenges, from the very beginning, actually, we launched in 2013. And in early 2014, we launched a program called Divvy for Everyone, because we realized while our program was not that expensive, there was still a cost to folks to use it. And so, at the time, I think our annual membership, when we launched the Divvy for Everyone program, our annual membership was about $100 a year, if I remember correctly, $90 to $100 a year. We came up with this Divvy for Everyone program, highly subsidized. It's $5 for an annual membership. And that's renewable as long as people continue to have the financial need. That is a renewable membership for $5. And if folks ride our classic pedal bikes, there's no additional fees after that. It's $5 a year, and you can essentially ride classic pedal bikes for an entire year for $5. As I also mentioned earlier, you do get discount per minute e-bike fees and scooter fees as well as part of the Divvy for Everyone program. We have cash payment and key fobs, as I mentioned, and there's currently about 6,000 Divvy for Everyone members. We've got about nearly about 38,000 Divvy members. So our Divvy for Everyone program is one of the highest as a percentage of members. In the US, it's one of the highest percentage of equity membership programs in the United States. So that's bike share in Chicago. We also have a shared scooter program, and the shared scooter program, there's a couple different things. As I mentioned, the Divvy program is a contractual program. The city owns the Divvy system. We actually own the trademark to the name Divvy related to shared micromobility in the United States. We have service level agreements related to the performance on the Divvy system. We also have scooter licensees, and you can see we've got about 1,500 scooters in the Divvy system right now that can, as I said, can dock into Divvy stations, which was the first in the US to allow that to happen. We also have licensees. So we also have a business license program, which was open competitively to up to 3 business licenses. We had Lime, Spin, and Super Pedestrian in the US or in Chicago until about August this year. Super Pedestrian just had orders of magnitude lower ridership than Lime and Spin, and they actually decided to exit the market. That combined fleet of the shared licensees, there's about 5,000 scooters currently operating as well in that system. So we've got about 6,500 scooters. On the bike side, I also forgot to mention, we've got about 13,000 bikes, and about a third of those are classic pedal bikes right now, and about 2/3 are e-bikes in our Divvy bike share system. So one of the things that we've prioritized, I mentioned key fobs and cash-based payments and other things that I already talked about. We've also really focused on equitable geography. And so what we did is when we launched the scooter share program, and also this applies to our Divvy bike share program as well, the areas that you can see outlined on my slide in light blue are what we call equity priority areas. And those areas are areas that were identified predominantly, some of them are transit deserts, but they're also predominantly what our health department termed as high economic hardship communities. They're on our south and west sides. Those are unfortunately the historically disinvested parts of the city, but they're places with more crowded housing, lower educational attainment, lower incomes, and a number of other metrics. And we use those metrics and that high economic hardship designation to create these equity priority areas. And it's roughly 50% of the geography of the city. And we require that the scooter companies put at least 50% of their scooters in those areas. Further, we actually have them subdivide their fleets. So they have to put 50% in the blue area broadly, but then they have to put 3% in each of the 10 sub areas that you can see labeled here as well. And the reason for that is we did a couple pilots in 2019 and 2020, and we did see that scooter companies, there are some more financially lucrative areas. Even within these economic hardship areas, there are more financially lucrative areas, and the scooter companies chased after those areas. So what we did is we kind of forced their hand and said, you have to put at least 3% in each of these sub areas. We did give them then 2% that they can get from each sub area, or 20% total that they can respond to demand. So we wanted to be somewhat flexible on that, but also wanted to make sure that the service was available to folks when they needed it and wanted it. And so what we've seen, some of the results, about 50% of the fleets have been deployed, 50% plus of fleets have been deployed in the equity priority areas on this slide shown in yellow. And, we're pretty excited because about 40% of the trips have occurred in equity priority areas. And that is, kind of proving the scooter companies wrong in some ways, in that they, we showed that there is a market there and that there is a demand there. And so we were excited to see that happen and see that occur. And the other thing that's really compelling, kind of going back to what Sara was saying at the beginning, one of the things, Chicago also has broad goals to reduce the climate emissions from our transportation sector. And one of the things that was exciting to us is that our survey results, we've done surveys in 2019, 2020, and then we partnered with the University of Illinois at Chicago to do surveys of basically that have been sent out to all customers of all the scooter companies. And over the years, the number has varied, but every year, at least 30% of folks who responded to the survey said that they would have taken a vehicle trip of some kind if a scooter was not available. So they would have taken a rideshare vehicle, they would have taken a taxi, they would have driven their own vehicle. And so that obviously in decarbonizing the transportation network is a really important goal for us, and really shows that this is helping. And with that, this is my contact information. I will stop sharing my screen and open it up, turn it back over to Daniel.
Thank you, Sean, for such an interesting presentation. I think the debate and the discussion is already going on in the chat for many of the topics we have addressed today. Well, one question for you, Sean, and then we can just jump into the panel because we are a bit behind. How do you identify people in need of the discount memberships? For instance, do you require proof of or income or referrals from other organizations? Is there a limit to the number of / length of rights with this membership? Yeah.
Yeah, so there is no limit to the number of discounted memberships. We and our operator, our system is, so this, as I mentioned, the city owns the system. It's operated for us by Lyft, which is a rideshare company in the US. But there is no limit. We are subsidizing that. There is no limit to the shared memberships. What we originally, when we started the Divvy for Everyone program, honestly, it was fairly complicated. Someone had to come in with their pay stub or attest that they didn't have any income so that they could get that reduced membership. Over the probably about a year or two in, what we did is we actually just started looking at other benefit programs that the US has, like food stamps, for example, and other LIHEAP, which is a low-income heating and energy assistance program, things like that. And if folks were eligible for that and could show their eligibility for that program, they could automatically qualify for the Divvy for Everyone program without showing income or any other thing like that. So we really tried to simplify it because our goal is to get more people on bikes and give people options.
Well, thank you, Sean. So I think now we can move on to the panel discussion. And here's the poll question I was mentioning. So you can answer to this poll question that is now currently on. But now jumping into the panel discussion. So very interesting insights from Europe and from the US. And also from the car sharing world. Maybe a question on how you can bring how Europe and the Oslo approach of integration and electrification and mobility hubs concept can how could you provide some insights to for instance Chicago and their shared micromobility strategies, and also to perhaps the case of Wilson and the microtransit service, and how maybe some of this equity and some of these also insights from how can we make more accessible public transportation can be applied into the Oslo case. Maybe you can start by, I don't know, how can you take some of the US in that regard, and how can you guys take some of Oslo in regards to integration and yeah. I'm
happy to jump in and start, and then I'll turn it over to Sara to talk a little bit about Oslo and that model. So we some of the things that Sara talked about, we've started talking about mobility hubs in Chicago. It's not something that there's been a broad push for. In fact, our electrical utility, I actually presented to a case to our the public body that was working on a beneficial electrification process, and our electrical utility was less interested in that. However, we are electrifying our Divvy stations, so our bike share stations. One of the things similar to the goals in Oslo, one of the things we're doing is the e-bikes. Obviously, currently we have to do battery swaps, and there's a carbon footprint to moving batteries around, not only moving bikes around, but then also separate vehicles potentially visiting those bikes to actually swap out batteries when the e-bike battery is getting low. And so we're going to have, probably when we're done, about 10 to 15% of our Divvy bike share stations will be electrified, so that bikes, when they're parked in a station, can charge the battery at the same time. Obviously, there's a little bit of art and science there as to picking the right stations so that the bike is there long enough to charge. So you can't have a bike station that's turning over bikes very, very quickly. So it's more art than science at this point, but would love to hear what Oslo is doing in that realm to kind of figure that question out.
Yes, so we have really left the logistics of switching batteries and everything up to the individual micro-mobility actors. So they have, of course, some vehicles who are moving the scooters or bikes around or changing batteries and stuff. And I know they also use cargo bikes full of batteries to go and switch batteries. So I think they're really testing out different ways to do it. It seems to be working quite well, but there's always the issue of sort of having enough bikes or scooters in the right spot where people use them. So that's especially in the city bikes, that's a bit tricky because they are not electric, and Oslo is a steep city, so people usually bike them downhill, and then no one wants to bike them uphill again. So then they have to be sort of moved around by a car to get them back to the stations where no one feel like biking to because it's too far uphill or something. So it's a bit of a logistical issue there, but it seems to be going okay for now.
Maybe to go back to the car sharing topic, Ramu. In your experience, what do you know about equity and accessibility within the car sharing industry? What are the trends, and how do you see perhaps some of the most what are the most most important initiatives in this regard?
Sorry. Yeah.
Could you hear me?
Sorry if I got your question right. I'm sorry, my connection is not the best at the moment. Hi, Daniel, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Do you want me to repeat the question? Oops, can we lost
no,
you.
I can't. My connection is a little bad.
Okay. So we can maybe move forward with Rodger. I think, for instance, Rodger, I was particularly curious about how do you see the microtransit, the on-demand microtransit service evolve in the future with regards to financial sustainability? Because as I understand it, it's sometimes it's quite costly to run this service. And yeah, it was just my question whether you have plans to integrate this service, for instance, within the public transport offer, like make it integrated, so it's not like something separate, but also can be can receive part of the revenues from the public transport operation.
Well, this would be a long answer, so I won't be able to get into it, but you know, I could go into a whole dialogue on transit funding and how we fund transit in the United States. It's a convoluted system, and I did not come from a transit background. I'm a urban planner by trade, and now in city management, and all these acronyms and different funding pots for different things is very confusing. I mean, it just, you know, give me a set of dollars to provide transportation, and I'll do the best that I can with a set of dollars, and it's just not that simple. So, you know, in a perfect world with additional funding, I think we've uncovered enough demand that we could add back fixed route. And if I could do that fixed route more frequent, so that maybe those routes were running 3 or 4 times an hour, we could be even more efficient, and I think we could even achieve more trips. It's you know, unfortunately, I just don't think in this country we're prioritizing transit like we should. I think we prioritize streets and highways far more than we do transit, so it just makes it a little bit more difficult. So I'd say we're behind the times. From a sustainability standpoint in Wilson, yes, the budget has gone up, but I think we've seen maybe where we're hitting a bit of a plateau. in the number of trips. So, you know, I mean, how much demand can there be in a city of 50,000? I mean, 220,000 trips is a pretty robust number of trips, I think, in a city of our size. We're not traffic congested, so I'm getting a lot of feedback here.
Thank you. I think we lost Rodger. There was some background noise. And now you muted, Rodger. Okay.
Yeah, now okay.
Okay.
So, yeah, you know, it's not like Chicago where there's a lot of traffic congestion. You know, we're a more rural community without that. So this is not, you know, when I was in Charlotte, I took transit because I didn't want to sit in traffic. That's not the case here in Wilson. You take it because you need to take a trip, or maybe your car's in the shop or something. So you take this service. So, you know, I feel like maybe we've reached that plateau where we know what the number of trips will be. And the way to add trips would be to be able to add hours of service. So, you know, could we operate the service till, let's say, 9 or 10 o'clock at night? Maybe help people get to those second shift jobs or whatnot. So that's our goal. But that, frankly, is a function of funding. And so as and we're getting more success in getting that funding. So I think we have a lot of support from our state. So I see us being held up as a model in the state. You can see that in the map I showed you, the expansion of that. The state's really pushing it. So I think there's going to be more funding uncovered, but the political process does not move as swiftly as I would like it to.
Yes, which actually relates to one of our poll questions, the results from our second to last poll question. How well? Sorry, it's success factors. What are the key success? What are the key factors for success in shared mobility? So the winning option is political leadership, indeed. So that's and then the second, funding. So I think those are the most important points to start rolling shared mobility. All right, and then we in third place we have a sustainable infrastructure, of course. Then the digital mass apps in fourth place, and others. So, but yeah, I think it's clear that political leadership and funding are the key to make changes in the way we move. I do have a question for Sean. So beyond the equity topic, talking about accessibility in a broader concept, do you have plans in Chicago for making shared micromobility accessible, for instance, for people with reduced mobility through volunteering schemes to adaptive vehicles, perhaps in those ways? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So we in our scooter share program, the licensee program with Lime and Spin, we require that at least 5% of the fleet of each of those companies have seated vehicles. So we have at least 5% of each of their fleets have to be seated scooters. And while we acknowledge that's not the complete solution, I think the challenge with shared micromobility in general is it's difficult to have the right vehicle at the right place at the right time for the right person. So we've done some, with our Divvy program, the city-owned system, we've done some partnerships with some companies that do accessible rides for folks that have hand cycles and other types of bikes in particular that people can ride at special events. But we have not, we and I would say across the United States, we've struggled to integrate accessible options into bike and scooter share, other than, like I said, seated scooters and some of those one-off type. Other cities in the US have done partnerships with bike shops where they'll have pedal hand cycles and other types of specialized bikes available. But again, it's, there's also challenges with if someone came in a wheelchair, what do you do with the wheelchair while they're riding the bike? And there's it's a complicated web of challenges with liability and other things that we've struggled with, frankly. It's a very important issue, but we've struggled with it.
Thank you, Sean. So before handing the baton to Richard, Dilks, Director of Como UK, for the final words. I would like to mention that there has been a very interesting debate in the chat about how to influence users' travel behaviors to use more shared mobility and car sharing. So that's very interesting, something going on there. I'm sorry I couldn't keep up to all the messages and very interesting questions that you were mentioning. But before that, I wanted to mention the results of the last question of the poll. So to the question of how well do you think the UK learns from best practice in other places? I'm assuming they share mobility practices. So very well, 0 responses, fairly well, 62%, and not well at all, 38%. So some point for reflection there for our UK colleagues. But yeah, thank you all for joining us today. It was very interesting to hear you and to also to read the debate in the chat. And I wanted to pass the baton to Richard Dilks for final words in the conference.
Thank you, Daniel, so much. Thank you to all the speakers in this session and all the contributors to the chat and across the previous sessions through the day too. Daniel, particularly thanks to you. You did so well for us, and also you were stepping in at a very late notice, we know, so we're particularly grateful to you there. This is the only gathering of its kind in the UK that is dedicated to shared transport, to shared mobility, and so I think it's particularly valuable and worthwhile that it comes together. And I also have been very, very grateful to get contributions from other parts of the world here. I would agree with that poll finding that Daniel, you were just taking us through. I think we can always do more here in the UK to be learning from other places. And so I think this is a great opportunity to do it. We'll put the recordings of all these sessions up online on my YouTube channel and so on, and we'll let you know when they're up. So do please share with colleagues, networks at that point if you think there are any points of interest there, and we'll be doing the same thing, of course. We're going to plan some face-to-face events next year as well. Online has its great upsides, very well shown in this session from being able to reach around the globe, but face-to-face is also great too. So watch out for that, and do let us know if you'd like to be involved with any of those. Sign up for our newsletter if you'd like to be more involved in our work. And most immediately, our next event is in fact our annual general meeting next Wednesday, which is 10:30 to 12 noon on the 13th. Thank you, Patrick, for putting up the slide. And to borrow a phrase, I think we're all working in sustainable transport veer between outrage and optimism, the state of how things go in the progressive direction for transport emissions, for equality, for equity and inclusion, or how they don't go in those progressive directions that we want to see. So I think it's been so useful to hear all these different perspectives across infrastructure, across services around the world. And I look forward to working with you all on tackling them in 2024. Thank you so much for being with us, and hope to chat. See you soon.